guess I think there's that piece where intimacy is typically thought of as kind of a romantic piece, or like maybe that's how you traditionally think of it. I think it's that thing you want to have more often than most of us do. And I think it's that um, comfort with exposing yourself and sharing and the support you get when you do that, I would say.
Intimacy, I think, is generally mistaken or misplaced into romantic relationships. And I think intimacy goes a lot further than that because I think intimacy is sort of paralleled with sex or sexual acts, and intimacy is the thing beyond that. I think intimacy is a lot harder to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And intimacy is also something that happens when we don't realize it. Mm-hmm. It's tiny moments with people. I think intimacy is very tiny moments.
The dominant conception that we get, right, is that intimacy is about having sex or about like feeling comfortable enough to have sex or whatever. And I think sex is totally different. At least for me, sex is like I could have sex with just about anybody and be like, okay, we had sex. Like it doesn't mean much. At least in romantic relationships, intimacy for me is like, can we sit in a room together in silence and feel okay?
I would say that, yeah, intimacy is primarily for me a very emotional connection that I try not to experience.
For me, I think when I'm intimate, it's when it's quiet and it's just usually one-on-one or a small number of people and I talking about things that you typically don't talk about during the day. When you let your feelings and your emotions come out that you were afraid to, or that you don't when you first meet them because that would be weird.
To be honest, like I've never really experienced intimacy on a romantic level. Mm-hmm. I've never, like, I dated a girl for a month, that was it, and never really got like to any emotional intimacy at all. Mm-hmm. So the only intimacy I've ever really had is familial, and I think one of the reasons for that is it just kind of scares me. Like, I'm not usually very open about my feelings, especially around new people. So opening up to people is kind of hard sometimes. And I feel like one of the biggest aspects of intimacy is being able to open yourself up or give yourself to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I just haven't been able to find myself being able to do that.
Being intimate with someone means being able to experience more of them than the rest of the world gets to experience. And the flip side goes for me, like letting people see those parts of me or sharing those parts of me with someone. I think like part of it is experience too, like having certain experiences with people, I think creates intimacy, going through something together.
I think there's a certain amount of trust that's implicit within intimacy. And I also don't believe that intimacy has to be completely paralleled with physical closeness. Mm-hmm. I think you can be just as intimate with a person or even an idea or a fantasy as you can with someone who's right next to you.
I think intimacy means a connectedness that goes beyond the usual walls that we put up between one another. So allowing a certain kind of access, and it should be mutual.
I think intimacy is connected to trust. I think intimacy also, depending on the person, can build over time and can be built through experience and through shared experience, but also through difficult experience. I experience intimacy mostly from the heart, but that it can also involve certain forms of, I would say, intellectual intimacy. So feeling intimate with an instructor, with a teacher, with a mentor on an intellectual level, or sometimes even intimacy. I think I can feel intimacy with an idea, or even, an author who isn't present, but I might be reading that person's work, and that work may feel or be something that I feel very connected to, or that I feel like they understand how I feel because I can identify myself or my own experience within whatever that writing might be. So I think I experience intimacy in a variety of different ways that are not necessarily bound to another person who is physically present in the same space that I am in.
When I think of being intimate, I think of this kind of never-ending energy with another human being that no matter what is happening around you, whenever you're with that person, there's an overwhelming sense of peace that you both experience, and that makes you feel at home.
Being vulnerable. I feel like that's the main thing about it. And if you can't be vulnerable, I feel like you can't be intimate. If you can't open yourself up and allow yourself to let your guard down, then you can't be intimate with anybody else.
I have very close, good friends that I rarely delve into deep conversation with, or let them into my past or my history. I'm sure I have best friends that have no idea what I've been through, or where I'm going, or where I am, and being here, everyone really opens up and lets the messy parts of themselves be seen, and I feel like that's really crucial to being intimate with someone and building and fostering that comfortability and trust and honesty.
I don't know that being what we would consider as 100% honest with another person you're in a relationship with, whether that's a friendship or a romantic partnership, or I don't really think that that's possible. I just think all of us hold too many things close to ourselves, and I think we experience things in ways that are different than each other, and I just think that that's not, it doesn't seem like something to expect. I would not expect that of a partner, that they're never going to they are to reveal everything to me that I ask, or that if I ask something and they tell me something different, that is the end of everything, that is such a huge violation. I think closeness is sometimes keeping shit to yourself.
I guess I'm afraid of finding someone I want to be intimate with, but then not understanding what that means to me, or being okay with what it means to me, or even respecting that. So I guess I'm afraid of someone using intimacy almost against me, like as like a forceful thing, as like something that you would usually call intimate, as something like unwanted. Like I would be, I guess I'm saying rape, but like I would be afraid of someone ruining intimacy for me, because that's like so prevalent in our society, like for women, for young women. So I would, yeah, I guess that would probably be my biggest fear, is someone ruining that experience or twisting my ideas about intimacy and making them just like fear itself, which is really twisted.
Loss. I think that's the other thing. As a parent, I think I never feared loss as much as when I became a parent. All of a sudden I had so much to lose, and you have an intimate relationship with your kids, and you will endure loss of whatever sort. You just will, because you will continue to feel about them that they are your intimates, right? And they need to pull away and form their own lives, and you need to matter less to them over time in that way. So you being a parent sets you up for loss, and I think that's directly related to intimacy, and that's when everything goes well.
Rejection of that intimate self, so that you show someone what you have inside you metaphorically or physically, and they say, I don't want that. And sometimes people generally don't want it, and that's okay. But for me, it's always been like, everybody has to want me or I have no value. Everybody has to see me or I have no value. Everybody has to look at me or I have no value. And a lot of that's tied up in like beauty standards and body image problems and just all of this terrible tornado of things. And so I guess my fear has always been, at its root, not being seen and not being listened to and not being heard.
I don't like people knowing me that well. I don't like the idea of someone being able to get inside my head that much, because that means they can tear you down. And I'm not about that. That's pretty much it, yeah. Like, I don't like... It's just that defenselessness. I don't do that. I always have something.
I think my fears are experiencing moments and then having them be insincere or having them go away. I think it's scary to have connections with people and believe in them and trust them and then have the rug ripped out from under you. And I think it's easy to experience, and I think we're all very good at covering it up. I think we are able to be like, oh, well, I used to know them, it's fine. We don't connect anymore, we don't talk. But I think it does matter. I think it's a big blow to people to stop having a person they connect with, even in a small way. I think we're constantly shocking ourselves because we have to let go of people so much, especially in our 20s. It's this age of letting go over and over and over again. And I think maybe that's why it's easier to connect as an adult. You're more confident because you know you will have a connection soon again.
Or maybe it's not measuring up to that person's expectations, so it's that little dance of what your expectations are of that person and of yourself, you know, and the reasonableness of sharing certain things, you know. Because I think you can share something with one person and it's not intimate, but sharing that with somebody else, you know, it feels more like, I guess, an exposure, right? And I think there's an excitement to being able to do that, right? And then that's the way that person receives it and kind of responds and gives back. To me, it's all about that communication. Yeah.
So when I met my partner, I thought that I was really, really interested in men exclusively, um, for whatever. And that's fine. But then I felt this amazing, immediate connection to her that I stewed on for a while. And I was like, what does it mean for me as somebody who, like, at that time I was presenting in a way that if you looked at me, it would not be hard for you to read me as gay or queer or whatever. And I still identify as queer, so that's not a problem. But like, she thought of me as like the gay dude on the trip, you know? And so I had that on me, and it took me a lot of work to work through it. And I stewed in it for a long time. It took me a really long time before I decided that I didn't give a shit about that. And that why would I let something so trivial as what I thought I was determine who I could be and what kind of connection I could foster? Um, like, what would it mean to let potentially one of the loves of your life go because you don't think they align with who you told them you were?
I think my biggest fear about experience intimacy is when you aren't fully in sync with your partner, and when you feel like you maybe never will be again. I think that terrifies me. I think that we like to think that our connections are everlasting, and in some ways they are, but in some ways they're also not. And even though that's part of life and that's okay, I think it can be terrifying to know that you at one point were so unbelievably connected to this specific individual, and now that connection maybe isn't lost, but has just taken its course and moved on through the universe. I find a lot of comfort in feeling these extreme connections to other people. And when I find out that they're not sustainable or not maybe as real as I thought they were, that makes me not want to be intimate, because it makes me feel like I'm being vulnerable and it's almost fake. Like, the connection is almost fake. But at the same time, there's so much power in understanding that nothing lasts forever, but that we have to learn to love all the little moments of deep connection that we do get to have with other individuals, even if they may not, last our whole lifetimes.
Honestly, I don't really have any fears towards intimacy. I feel that way because when you open yourself up, you allow yourself to trust that person. Sometimes that trust is broken, and I mean, that happens sometimes. But I, I I wouldn't necessarily say that I have fears towards it because there are things that, I don't know, there are things that I am very open about, and I have no problem being intimate with anybody in that kind of sense. Um, I could sit up and talk until like 4 a.m. with people about intimate things, or I can become intimate with somebody else, not afraid of it. So, therefore, I feel like I have no fears of it.
Any kind of fear towards intimacy is either trying to have these moments and it not working out, like you're afraid someone is going to spill the beans in some way. There's a level of distrust and apprehension that makes it almost not intimate to begin with. Or you're just afraid of the repercussions of what someone will think, even though it doesn't really matter, but, you know, of whatever you share might not be what the person had envisioned for you in the first place.
Maybe it would be like a fear of being misunderstood, right? Or of not being trusted. So the insecurity would be related to a feeling of someone with whom I had established an intimate relationship not believing that I was being authentic or that I was carrying the appropriate amount of trust for them, or that we would miscommunicate or not be able to communicate because they didn't believe that I was being authentic, or felt that I was saying one thing and meaning another.
I think that for women it's kind of necessary to learn the differences between intimacy and vulnerability, because it's very dangerous to be vulnerable as a woman. It's incredibly dangerous. I mean, yeah. So I think I built up a way to experience intimacy without feeling unsafe, because a lot of vulnerability for me is feeling unsafe, and that's something that I have to think about too, because that's kind of dangerous too.
So what about it would you say is dangerous?
I was raped when I was 14. Oh, I don't even know how old I was. It's all fucked up in my brain, but I was raped when I was pretty young, and it took me a really long time to realize it, because I didn't know that rape has nuances. And I didn't know that you can be violated without a stranger in a ski mask beating the shit out of you. And I think that at that moment I felt vulnerable. I felt unsafe. I felt like he could do anything he wanted to me. And then after it happened, I felt like he could do anything he wanted to me for the rest of my life.
Sexual intimacy can also really kill emotional intimacy as well. If you are emotionally intimate with someone and you feel safe with them, and then they push physical intimacy on you when you don't want it, that will completely break your ability to be emotionally intimate with that person. I personally try and avoid sexual intimacy because I've only really ever experienced it in cases of emotional intimacy where then sexual intimacy was expected and I didn't want it. And I think that can be one of the most betraying experiences. If you feel like you need to give yourself to someone sexually when you don't want to, and when you just want to be emotionally intimate. I know we technically call that rape or sexual abuse, but I think most people have experienced it to some degree or another when you've been emotionally intimate with someone, and sex or physical intimacy is then all of a sudden implied because of that emotional intimacy, and I think that that's once again just not true.
For me, it's just like a level of letting your guard down and trusting and just like allowing yourself to be close enough to somebody to like create a genuine human connection with them.
It's something more than just the sum of the two of you.